If you stroll along the same grapevines I do, you probably have heard this piece of news a couple of months ago about Alice Cooper's brush with political correctness. He expressed non-mainstream views about one particular infected subject, and as a result, he was let go by a makeup company he had a contract with. The first thought that comes to mind about this is, and why on earth should a rock musician have an opinion that is mainstream about anything? But okay, I understand. We have the world we have. Freedom of expression is where it is right now, and there's little room for deep thinking when, in the immortal words of Black Sabbath, the mob rules. Those declarations were a blunder, all right, and to say it all, one that puzzles me a bit. As a clever businessman who has created a long-lasting, successful brand, one would assume Cooper knows by now that the only law in commerce is numbers. Any entity that sells a product of whatever kind is always going to go with what the majority says. You target that majority because you want to sell as many units of your whatever as possible. That's all there is to it. The makeup company ditched Cooper only for that reason, not for any kind of deep ideological concerns. And if he was going to express unpopular opinions, which is his right, and perhaps even to an extent he felt as his moral duty to, he'd have better luck at least sticking to some subject in which he was not monetarily involved. Too bad, too sad the world we're living in, because a character like Alice Cooper having his own makeup line is something that just feels right and cool, and now the PC rhinos have trampled on it like on so many things for one of their confusing and esoteric reasons. A second shocking element in this episode for me was the fact that at this point of his half-a-century spanning career, Mr. Cooper must have held interviews by the thousands or tens of thousands, so one would expect that he knows better than expressing nuanced and guarded opinions in front of a reporter. Professionals whose focus is not the deep analysis but the quick, short, catchy headline of the moment they can use to turn heads. This comes with the medium and cannot be avoided. The headlines, the 400-word pieces, mutilate and trivialize inevitably any attempt at deep thinking, and it really stuns me that Mr. Cooper could fall for something like that. And that ends my main thoughts about the episode. That to me wasn't that interesting anyway. The PC Warriors strike again, so what else is new? But that's only part of what I wanted to talk about. I see this incident as part of a chain of events that started for me 2 events before, and whose starting point was the release of Alice Cooper's latest album, entitled Road. I listened to the different singles of the album as they dropped with a growing feeling of affliction, as they all gave me the same impression. The way that album is conceived and executed, in my view, is not only not good, but it also puts Cooper on a dangerous path. Not only I find the songs musically cheap and hollow, I also find their themes dull, too self-referential, and sometimes also falling in bad self-plagiarism. Worse than that, the collection as a whole gives a sort of feeling of claustrophobia, of lack of fresh air running. Alice said that the album was recorded live at the studio with his touring musicians because they are top-notch musicians and he wanted to capture the energy they get in their concerts. Put like that, it sounds like a good idea, but is it really? After going on tour for months with a group of tour musicians, is it really a good idea to lock yourself up with those same tour musicians and record an album about touring? No wonder things start to feel a bit endogamic. In addition to that, being a good performer is not a guarantee that someone is a good writer too. For all their merits, I don't think any of Alice Cooper's tour musicians are in the same creative league as he is. Judging from their own output, plus interviews and such, they give me more a feel of mercenary musicians, proficient at playing whatever piece of music they are presented with and playing the required part at the stage, but not really creators in the deep and personal way Alice is, with a distinctive body of work, recognizable themes and obsessions, they can certainly get the job done. But for me, they belong more to that breed of musicians who, rather than artists, put the emphasis on being professional musicians in the most meat and potatoes sense of the term. That kind of musician who takes pride in, I can crank out a new tune in half an hour. Okay, sure you can. But will it be any good? Will it say something to someone? Will it be memorable? Wouldn't it be better starting by having something you need to say and then cranking out the song around it? I think Alice should rethink his approach for the next one. Maybe writing and mingling with other people, and certainly writing about other things than the fact that he tours and that his name is Alice. It's been a long, long time since that name, Alice Cooper, stopped being a band name and became a solo artist name. He's the only one who should be at the helm, and these songs certainly don't give that impression. In fact, they often give that gloomy feeling you get of things that have been done by committee, where no one is really taking charge and everybody is more focused on getting through the day without making waves than in achieving the best results at whatever the cost. That would explain the total platitude of the song themes. Hey, let's not piss the boss with an opinion or observation that he might not share. Let's just stick to the safe stuff. The show. We all know what the show is, right? No need to explain. And Alice is Alice. That's our boss's name. Of course, who else? Who could argue that? I'm hoping this trend changes in future albums, if there are more of them, because otherwise, next thing you know, we'll have songs about room service, sax in this hotel, or bummer, our flight got cancelled. Although even those themes could be an improvement over this navel-gazing exercise, as long as they are told with a bit more of focus and the right, playfully deviant point of view we've come to know and love from Alice. So that's the first event in my chain. I really didn't like Road by Alice Cooper, even receiving it with my biggest benevolence, because I find damn admirable whenever well-established musicians continue launching new stuff, a task that is totally ungrateful for them. They come from a time when launching an album implied you were going to make money out of it. Shocking, I know. While nowadays it means the opposite, an investment in which, in the best case scenario, I'm guessing, they'll break even at most. And it isn't an endeavor that audiences think too much either. In general, they just want you to stick to the well-known jukebox. Under such conditions, continuing to put out stuff is always for me a sign of a true artist, of someone who cannot help himself, which I always admire. But the results in this case were so poor that made me think that perhaps this new album was just an effect of the force of habit. Maybe a musician who's been so many times through the album tour cycle that just sticks to that routine for inertia, recording an album because it's that time of the year, not so much for having actually much new to say. Too soon to tell if this is the case with Alice. This is not like a final sentence. Musicians have their ebbs and flows like anything. And in the worst case scenario, I thought if Alice Cooper was going to enter in this kind of semi-autopilot, he has well earned his laurels by now and needs to prove nothing to anybody. Plus, even in the most minor works of any musician who's been around for so long, you're always going to find modest treasures here and there. It's a bit like it happens to me with Neil Young. His production in the latest years is far from masterful, but it's always so good to see him reappear and see what he's been up to and find the occasional little gem. Plus, the only hope of getting a good album at some point is that, good or bad, you keep on making them. So the listening of the Road singles left me in a state of sort of hopeful expectancy, not knowing what could come next from Alice Cooper land. And what came after a while was the second event of my chain. I read that interview that was soon to become controversial. In those moments of purity before the backlash, I didn't think much about the subject itself or considered it loaded in any way. I agreed with many things Alice said, found others perhaps a bit far-fetched, but all in all, I didn't think anything he said was too extreme. But what did strike me a lot, though, and in an incredibly positive manner, was hearing him explaining himself in such a clear, articulate, and energetic way. I guess after listening to Road, I was expecting something more on the side of the complacent grandpa, mumbling easy slogans on his way to lunch. To my surprise, what I found here instead was a person with a fully engaged brain, sharp and vibrant, a person living in our world of here and now, and speaking his mind in a concise, focused, dare I say bold way. There's hope, I thought. We can still expect some good Alice Cooper album in the future. We can expect comedy and satire and fun gore and social commentary again. The years were still there. In fact, he came across so lively in that interview that it came to my mind as saying about how musicians age slower than the rest of mortals. And then, a short while later, the third event completed the chain. The irate response from whomever for who knows exactly what reason. That, like I say, for me was the most uninteresting and unoriginal thing of the whole series in this depressing planet of ours. Leaving that apart, the contrast between those two Alices, the one who sleepwalked his way through an album of navel-gazing, and that man with his very detailed, well-defined and expressed ideas, was so tremendous that got me thinking. Could it be that what we had here was a case of misplacement of energy? If all the eloquence, the feistiness, the fine observation, the synthesizing examples had gone to the album sessions, that interview wouldn't have happened that way. All the energy would have gone into the music, and perhaps Alice Cooper fans would have now some new character. I don't know, for example, an androgynous psycho killer with a bionic arm obsessed with taking selfies. The PC rhinos will use any opinion you express to trample on you. But they cannot trample on you when you turn your ideas into something creative, because PC rhinos cannot reach that realm, and even if they could, the love you receive in exchange for telling your stories is going to protect you. Besides, the rhinos fear creativity and they don't want to have anything to do with it. And that's all the blunder Alice made, in my view. He put the right eggs on the wrong basket. On top of everything, I find deeply ironic that all this mess had to happen to a man who has made a whole successful career of calling himself Alice. I don't think it gets more non-binary than that. What the hell do you want, people?